Hello students, today I'm going to take up a new topic, that is analytical paragraph writing. As we all know that cbse has brought a recent change in the pattern of the question paper. We have part A, which is totally objective and is for 40 marks, and part B, which is totally subjective, which is also for 40 marks. So under subjective, we have writing skills, and under writing skills, we have two questions. One is formal letter and the second one is analytical paragraph writing. So today I'm here with this new concept, that is analytical paragraph writing. What do you mean by the word analyze? Analyze is nothing but to examine something methodically and in detail, typically in order to explain and interpret it. So what are we going to analyze to write a paragraph? We are going to analyze a visual stimulus or a non-verbal stimulus. Non-verbal stimulus could be in the form of a table, graph, chart, data, outline, etc. Okay, so analytical paragraph is nothing but a form of writing that interprets the facts which are presented in the form of table, graph, chart, data, outline, cues or hints, etc. So a graph or chart is nothing but a visual stimulus or a non-verbal stimulus to depict the data. Data interpretation requires an analysis, as I already told, and comparison of the given facts and drawing conclusions based on the given data. Yes, what are the main features of this analytical paragraph? We need to describe the given chart, table, data, graph or cues, whatever form it is given. And the paragraph should be brief and comprehensive. That is, it should include complete information. And we should use simple and accurate language and mention figures and quantities appropriately. No personal observation or response should be provided. Try to preferably use passive form of the verb. The main elements of analytical paragraph include introduction, body, and conclusion. Before we begin with the introduction, we need to give a suitable title for our paragraph. So introduction includes the topic of the graph that explains what the graph shows and also outlines overall trends or patterns. Or in other words, it paraphrases the questions. That is, it unlocks the real meaning of the question. Or we need to write an overview or a thesis statement. Thesis statement is nothing but one statement that gives the main idea of the visual stimulus. So, introduction, it includes one or two lines. That is, it is going to explain what the graph shows and it is just going to outline the overall trends or patterns. Okay, or it also means that we are going to paraphrase the question or we are going to write a thesis statement. That is the introduction. And we need to write in one or two lines. Next comes the body of the paragraph. Now we are going to elaborate the thesis. That is, we need to look for the differences or the similarities and the terms which remain constant. Okay, so the second point describes the trends in more detail and illustrates these using data from the graph. So we need to look for large differences that are very prominent. Next, mention the aspects having similar trends or values. Then the aspects that remained unchanged or constant throughout. So divide the body into two paragraphs for clarity. Then last comes the conclusion, where we are going to wind up the analytical paragraph. We need to keep in mind in the conclusion, we are not going to express our personal opinion. Okay, so we are going to write whatever we interpret from the visual stimulus or from the graph or the chart. Okay, in fact, we are just going to rephrase a thesis statement. So with this, we are going to end the analytical paragraph, right? So it is divided into three main elements: introduction, body, and conclusion. Introduction is nothing but you need to write a thesis statement. That means what is the main idea the graph or the chart is trying to convey to you. That's it, right? Then in the body you are going to elaborate. Therein, there we need to write the paragraph, whatever. If it is a process, you need to write in the sequence fashion. If there are differences, you need to highlight the differences. If there are similarities, you need to highlight the similarities, right? Then comes the conclusion, wherein you are going to just rephrase the thesis statement, right? Then, what are the questions that we should have in mind before writing the analytical paragraph? Generally, the visual stimulus is in the form of a line graph or a bar graph or a pie diagram or a chart or a process diagram, so on and so forth. So what are the questions we have to frame before we begin to write the analytical paragraph? Basically, we are trying to transform the information which is in the form of a chart or a diagram into a verbal form. That is, we are going to write, we are converting the visual into a paragraph, right? So what kind of data is being shown there? What are the axes? What do we have on x-axis and what do we have on y-axis? Okay, what are the columns or rows? What is the units of measurement? Is 1 centimeter equal to, like, is it in thousands or tens or whatever? Is there more than one group being compared? Does it show change over time? What are the time periods? Is it from 19th century to 20th century, or it is a period of 10 years, something like that? What is the general trend, whether it is decreasing, whether increasing, or it is being constant? Are there any large differences between groups or charts? Are there any group or chart that share similarities? So all these questions you need to have beforehand before we write the analytical paragraph. Basically, we are trying to transform the information which is in the form of a visual stimulus or a non-verbal stimulus into a verbal part. That is, we are trying to transfer or transform that diagram into a paragraph. Okay, so we need to divide that into three parts. So are we able to break it conveniently into three parts? The three parts are nothing but introduction, body, and conclusion. Right. So now if you look at the maps over here, we have two maps. Okay. So the map actually shows an island before and after construction. So if map is given, so what are the questions we should have in our mind before we write the analytical paragraph? Is there more than one map being compared? What are the time periods shown? Are they in different maps or in the same map? What are the most noticeable differences between the multiple maps or time period? What parts of the map are the same in both and in time periods? Can the map or maps be easily broken into three parts, and how? Now, if a process diagram is given, so what are the questions we should have beforehand? Where is the start of the process and the end? How many total stages are there? For example, if it is a water cycle or if it is a life cycle of a butterfly, okay, how many stages are there? What kind of process is it? Is it a cycle? Cycle in the sense like a water cycle, it starts and it is continued, the cycle continues. Or it is a linear, that is finish to, start to finish process, like where you have an end product in the cement production. Okay, now what is the end result? Is something produced? Can the process be easily broken into three parts? Right. So now since basically we are trying to transform a diagram or a chart or a visual stimulus into a paragraph. So we should have lot of vocabulary at our, in our mind. Okay, we should have lot of inputs, verbal inputs, or I mean to say vocabulary with us. Otherwise, it is very difficult for us to write a paragraph because only a graph or a diagram is provided and we need to convert that into a paragraph. So we need to have vocabulary at our hand, right? So this, whatever the phrases you can see over here, this phrases you can use for introduction part. Okay, so introduction, I said, as I said, it is just a thesis statement and it should be just in 1 or 2 lines. Okay, so these phrases will be of great help, like the given graph or line graph outlines, denotes or expresses. The presented process diagram sketches out, illustrates, enumerates. Okay, so in this way you can begin your introduction, make use of these phrases. Then coming to, now suppose if it is a process, you can use this vocabulary, like if it is in a sequence, like firstly, secondly, then next, afterwards, finally, eventually, previously. And for addition, you can use conjunctions like and, also, in addition to, further, furthermore, as well as, and, then, and to. And if you want to emphasize on something like above all, especially, more importantly, indeed, significantly, notably, in particular. And what is the trend? Is it increasing or decreasing? Okay, now the essential commodities price has skyrocketed, increased, or it has come down, dropped down, plunged, plummeted. So these are the verbs to describe the increasing or decreasing trends. So this vocabulary, it should be with you always. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult for you to write an analytical paragraph, right? Then we can also use the adverbs, like how much did it decrease? Is it a sharp decrease or a quick decrease, a quickly, rapidly, steeply, or considerably, significantly, substantially, steadily, gradually, moderately, slightly, or slowly? So these are the adverbs you can use. Okay, so you need to make your paragraph very, very effective by using all these phrases or vocabulary, right? Then we have a sample question here. In case a pie diagram like this is given, how are you going to write an analytical paragraph? The pie chart shows the proportion of people from different households living in poverty in the UK in 2002. Write an analytical paragraph to describe the information in 100 to 120 words. So basically the question is going to be like this. Okay, it could be in the form of a pie chart or a line graph or a bar graph. Okay, so we need to look at the question and the diagram and transfer this information in the form of a paragraph. That's why we need to analyze the given data. So the data now given over here is a pie chart. So you should look at the pie chart thoroughly and see the colors, what each color signifies, and based on that we need to write an analytical paragraph. Yes, so the sample of the same pie graph I'm going to give you here. So introduction, as I told you, it is going to be very, very simple. You can pick out the introduction right from the question itself. The given pie chart illustrates 7 different categories of households living in poverty in the UK in 2002. Now we will elaborate what we have written in the introduction. What does the pie chart actually show? It is clearly evident from the pie chart that 26% of the total poverty-stricken households are those of sole parents. Okay. and single people without children account for the second highest proportion with 24%. In contrast to couples without children, that accounts for just 9%. Couples with children account for 15% of the poor households. Single aged persons and aged couples proportion for 12% together for poor households. Okay, so here they have combined the 7 and 5 and they have mentioned as 12% together, right? And finally the conclusion. You should be very careful while writing the conclusion. You should not write your opinion and write any of the ideas of your own here, right? So you cannot say, according to me, I conclude by saying, and all that should not be included, and should never use the first person I. So whatever you understand from the graph, whatever it is conveying, the same thing has to be written over here. You will not add any information on your own. Overall, 14% of all households in the UK were living under poverty. The younger generation had a greater poor percentage than their aged counterparts. Couples without children had better economic conditions than those with children. So based on your graph and understanding, you need to interpret and finally give the conclusion. Is that okay? Now let us move to another example. Here we have a line graph. Okay, the graph below gives information about changes in the birth and death rates in New Zealand between 1901 and 2101. Summarize information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So here on x-axis we have the years which is running from 1901 to 2101, and on the y-axis you have births and deaths, okay, which is in thousands. So 10 means 10,000, 20 is 20,000, 30 is 30,000. So that is a scale or the measurement, right? So now here is a graph of the birth rate, and which is in dark black color, and here is the line graph of the death rate. Okay, so now you have to interpret or analyze the given data. Okay, you need to pick out the thesis statement or the introduction. You can from the question itself. Okay, right. So the graph shows changes in birth and death rates in New Zealand since 1901 and forecast means predicts, because we don't know what is going to happen in 2101. We can only predict it. So trends tip until 2101. So that is going to be your introduction. Very simple and sweet. That is the thesis statement, right? Then coming to the body is conveniently divided into two paragraphs here. You are going to elaborate the information now. Okay, what is the information we find here, right? So what is change in the birth rate right from 1901 to 2101? What is the change in the death rate from 1901 to 2101? Is there an increase or a decrease, or did it level off, or it has there is a steep rise? So all that we have to look into and convert into a paragraph. So between 1901 and the present day, the birth rate has been consistently higher than the death rate. Okay, it stood at 20,000 at the start of this period. We can see it stood at the 20,000 at the start of the period and increased to a peak of 66,000. Okay, this is a peak, 66,000 in 1961. Since then, the death rate has fluctuated between 65 to 50. From 65 to 50 it had fluctuated, okay, and it is expected to decline slowly to around 45,000 births by the end of the century, right? So it might decrease. You can see the decrease over here, right? Then coming to, now we'll totally take up next paragraph to convey information about the death rate. In contrast, death rate started below 10,000. You can see here the graph is beginning just below 10,000 and has increased steadily until the present time, and this increase is expected to be more rapid between 2021 to 2051. You can see it's more rapid over here, and when the rate will probably level off, little bit leveling is over here. Okay, that means there's neither decrease or increase. It is leveled off at around 60,000 before dropping slightly in 2101. So this is the information given in the graph, and you have interpreted and you have written over here into paragraphs. And finally, the conclusion. So what do you understand basically, and what does a graph is trying to convey to you? That is the conclusion. Overall, these opposing trends mean that the death rate will probably overtake the birth rate. So what is a conclusion based on the graph? Okay, will probably overtake the birth rate in around 2041, and the large gap between the two levels will be reversed in the later part of this century. So based on this graph, you have given a conclusion. Okay, so this is the way you're going to write an analytical paragraph, and it is for 5 marks, children. Actually, it is supposed to be for 10 marks, but then this COVID-19 has given you a saving grace, okay, and it has been just reduced to 5 marks. So if vocabulary is at your hand, it is very easy to interpret the given graph or whatever and write an analytical paragraph. Basically, you're analyzing the given data. The data is either given in the form of a graph or a chart, or bar graph, line graph, or a process diagram. It could also be given in the form of a input or cues, or or a hints, and you need to elaborate. Okay, so introduction is very easy. You have to pick out the introduction right from the question. Okay, and in the second, that is the body of the paragraph, you need to just elaborate it, and finally you're going to conclude it. So if you're thorough with the way of writing the analytical paragraph, then 5 marks is in your pocket. Is that okay, children? So with this, I'm going to end my explanation, right?